Welcome to Market Your Science, the podcast that dives into the world of life sciences marketing. Join me, Jane Antique, and Martina Neville as we unravel the mysteries and conquer the challenges faced by life sciences companies looking to communicate their research. Hi, folks. Again, we're here for another episode of Market Your Science. I say this every episode. I will continue to say this every episode. We are graced by a distinguished guest today. I'm not going to steal his thunder. Do you want to introduce yourself?
That's not me.
Yeah.
I was looking at Martina like, go on then. No, I will do. So my name is Ricky. I started Point Science Analytics, which is in the field of technical advisory for ultra high net worth family offices and VCs in the bio and deep tech sphere.
Oh, what does that mean?
There's my cheeky elevator pitch. Basically, what it means is technical due diligence, specific deal flow, vetted deals of startups raising in the bio and deep tech world, and then a lot of business development strategically for assisting these ultra high net worth investors, family offices, VCs with moving the pin forward themselves in what they are doing.
And if you had to tell that to your auntie or uncle?
I help people with a lot of money understand science and put their money to make it worthwhile.
Brilliant. I was going to say, because I was like, there's three layers there. You know how to talk to it, and you got really good at it. And I was like, one more level. But yes, welcome to the podcast, Ricky.
So, yeah, welcome.
Thank you.
So I was going to say, before we start, we're a couple of episodes in already, and I'm going to say we're actually looking at this backwards because this time it would have been the lead up to Christmas, but we're launching after Christmas. We're launching in the year, but we're all quite festive. So I just wanted to be able to explain that if you are seeing the video,
it is December.
Yeah, we've got something to the likes of the Archangel Gabriel here, but in form of the Archangel Martina of marketing, the patron saint of marketing, and telling you how it is.
More like the devil.
Speaking of the devil, the better you know. So, Ricky, so you've been on LinkedIn for a long while now, but you really started to get active 2 years, I'd say, 2 years ago. So yeah, what's that journey been like from where you were then to where you are now? Because I think you've done a few pivots.
Yeah, that would be accurate. Yeah, so I actually started with about, I'd say 200 connections or so, connections/followers, whatever you want to call it. There were 200 people in my network, began posting on LinkedIn with absolutely no idea why I'm doing this posting business, but just thought, let me just give it a crack and see what the response is. And then started engaging. And you're completely right. My content has pivoted. So I started by posting just after finishing my PhD and coming out of a phase of really trying to balance my mental health, well-being, and suicide and things like that, where I got out on LinkedIn and was posting about, in hindsight, the PhD journey and lessons as a PhD at the end. Then that changed to PhD transitioning to entrepreneurship, which then changed to neuroscience and biotech-based posts, summary of people being funded or insights into specific biotech and deep tech. And now it's a lot of, based on the calls that I have with investors, VCs, family offices, other individuals in deep tech and biotech as well. And yeah, just insights to add value to the ecosystem and the sphere.
Wow. That's
you're kind of this new age of PhD graduates where like they go straight into entrepreneurship from their PhD, which is still quite unique, isn't it? So just going back to that, like, why did you choose to do that?
So I felt like I had no choice, and it's something I'm going to talk about publicly in the future. And it was either my back's against the wall, do I give up or go for it? And when I say give up, I mean like end of life sort of situation, the feeling, right? But there's never been a case where I've truly given up. Like I don't do that in life. I've never done that. I haven't achieved what I have. I got to where I am and will go where I'm going to
Mm,
by having that sort of mentality.
mm,
Um, and I just went, just go for it.
yeah.
Like absolutely go for it. I have nothing to lose, but everything to gain, quite literally. Like if things do not work out in whatever you define as not working out, I would have learned a lot and I would have met a lot of cool people, two of which are on this call, right?
Mm,
And so it just happens things are working out and things are going well in terms of the strategy, what I'm trying to do, the
mm.
various ventures I'm embarking on. Um, so yeah, I went in head first. I was kind of like, what it reminds me of is those like first year uni dropouts, the Silicon
Oh,
Valley classic, where
oh,
they
yeah.
drop out, they start a business,
Mm,
they're like, I'm running this B2B SaaS, we've got this great app, we've sold it as it's a unicorn, and look at me, the only difference is I've done 3 degrees and then jumped straight into the business, and I have
mm,
all of this knowledge. It's like how not to be the next Elizabeth Holmes, or don't be 19, recruit people and
mm,
have no expertise. I say this to investors. I go, it's easy for anybody to talk technical shit and
mm,
confuse you. If they're doing that, it's a
Mm.
red flag.
mm.
Have at least one individual at the PhD level who can break things down and has access to others.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
actually that's really key because so we live this in. I'm going to use a really posh term here. We live in this interesting dichotomy where on the one hand there are people that exist that are really smart that don't have the PhDs and can break things down for people, but then you have your PhDs who can also do that and vice versa. But then there's also people in different spheres of whether they do or don't have a PhD that make life infinitely more complicated. So I guess my question here is that how do you navigate all of that confusion and finally find the sweet spot? Because there are people out there that are still struggling to figure out where it is, especially in the context of marketing as well. But generally speaking, I think let's just push aside marketing for a moment because actually the theory is very much here. How do you cut through all of that noise to find that sweet spot to say, I think I know what I'm doing and I know how I'm going to work this market and this is how I position myself?
Yeah, so well, one key thing is a PhD is like looking through the microscope. You tend to look at one single thing, whereas investment and entrepreneurship in particular is like looking through the telescope. You need
Mm,
to look through and see all of the stars, the different arrangements, what's going on, and
mm,
then fine tune into one certain thing. Um, that's the best way I describe it in terms of the microscope and telescope like analogy. And
great.
it's really about understanding specifics but and then taking a step back. If you're unable to take the step back and view things with the overview picture, either the bird's eye view or the telescope view, then any sort of strategy or understanding doesn't really go through. That was an interesting.
He's our star guest.
It's Amos in the background. It's
Oh,
completely
even
derailed.
better.
No, but he was probably agreeing with you there, because I really like that sort of the macro micro
Yeah.
view, telescope versus microscope, and it's there's so you can look at both lenses and people are like, yeah, great, and you've actually talked about the skill of being able to transition, so the transcope between micro and macro, because I tell you what, there's so many people that just don't know how to flex that skill. And you need to do that, especially if you, and this is what really comes down to how you become agile, because I've seen you do it really reflexively, but you can only do that if you're, how do I say, operationally unburdened. Because that's me being polite for saying, actually, you got too much crap on you, like too much, just too much to shift and move. Large corporations cannot shift from the macro or the micro quickly, whereas small biotechs do it so much, it's like watching a hadron collider, just the particles moving at lightning speed to see how fast you can get things to go. So for you, like, how long did it take for you to just kind of figure that out, or are you still in the process of figuring that out? Because to me, you kind of like observingly from outside looking in, you don't you just flitter very well in that gray space, which I think most people are currently feeling at the moment, but they feel very uncomfortable. It's kind of like crossing the channel and you're on a rickety boat.
Yeah, so I've always had that ability to communicate something complex, or depending on the time in my life and at what point, so undergrad, master's, PhD, or anything along these lines, and really explain it simply. So the first instance I'd say is mum hasn't been to university, didn't, I don't think, finished high school, and I'm still able to communicate a lot of what I'm doing and even deep tech ventures to her for her to understand. And if she can, that's a good thing. But and then speaking, I've realized when you have that knowledge and you're privileged enough to have obtained that knowledge, being able to speak in short bursts to demonstrate that is key. When if I was to rattle off loads of neuroscience based information, like, to be honest, you're not really going to give a shit after a certain point. No one is. And I've had people say, can we just jump on a call? I need your hand with this. And I sometimes do that. 15 minutes into what should have been a 20-minute call about what their, I guess, product or company does. And they've just rattled on with too many technical details. It's like, and I say, oh, can you exit the full screen mode? And it's like they're on slide 12 of 50. And it's like, I'm sorry, but no, like, it's not going to happen, because if I'm the PhD and I'm confused, you're definitely going to confuse people who are viewing this very quickly, or who will only give you 3, maybe 5 minutes of their time before they start to veer away from the end of the call and say, oh yeah, it's probably not for us, but keep us in the loop. Yeah, to that respect, it's just that innate ability I had, and then I thought I should be able to do something about this, because I remember being on nights out and explaining things to people who were non-scientific background, even arts background or anything else, ex-military, and they just really understand it. They go, oh, you have a great way of explaining things. I was like, oh, there must be there sure as shit must be a way of putting this together. And so I slot in, like you said, Janie, in a really niche area as the individual in the investor, VC, family office landscape, but can understand and speak the business terminology as well, and the strategy involved in how to, like, develop relationships, move the pin forwards, where the gaps are, and then also has the network to fall back on, and even more so can speak of the science, because I've got a PhD.
Yeah.
And many people are now realizing, like, holy shit, because you'll get the individuals who have the finance background that speak the investor and business language, but then it comes to the science side of things, especially in pre-seed to like series A, B, C, or whatever, they come unstuck and they need to bring external individuals on board. Whereas they realize speaking with me, it's like an all-in-one, which is niche as hell.
I feel like you've accomplished what most people, like, this is like over 50% of marketing, right? Knowing how to communicate to your audience. So you already have that skill. As we know, you're a marketing guru already, right?
I was just going to say.
But I guess the question is how has that helped you on a platform like LinkedIn?
Oh, that ability to literally post.
Yeah.
Genuinely, just stop thinking about what people will say stuff no matter what, whether I do good or do bad. And I think the boxer Floyd Mayweather said this. He was just like, he goes, whether I win or lose, people are going to say stuff. I'll win and I'll be 50-0 in my career, and they'll be like, oh, but he ran away the whole fight, he didn't really box. And then I'll lose a fight and they'll be like, oh, well, told you he'd lost, he'd lose eventually. And I always apply that to myself. Like, during my PhD, I could have dropped out and individuals would have been like, oh, look at him trying to do a neuroscience PhD, couldn't hack it. And then when I obviously got my PhD, people were like, oh, he thinks he's a bit of somebody now that he's got the doctor title and whatever.
No one's ever happy.
Yeah, no one's ever happy. You can't appease and please people, but you can appease and please yourself and make yourself better. And what I'm a firm believer of is the right people, the right like-minded individual always find each other.
Yeah, I believe that too.
Correct. There's
But
something
it happens
about
by posting.
Yeah,
if you don't post, you don't know.
Yeah, you can't control how people receive you, and so you've got to be able to curate what it is that you feel happy about, what you put out there, and it's all about intent. And I think this is the thing that largely gets just diluted. I bang on about this so much. I think it's you probably all like, I probably should open a church about the church of intent. because but then Ricky does it, because Ricky just like innately does it. His pure intent is to help people out and to communicate what he knows And then also at the same time, like, he's not bound by the restrictions and the covenants of, oh well, Sammy, he thinks he's too much, or he doesn't know enough, or yada yada yada, and he does it really well. And so no matter what happens, you can't control how somebody's going to receive you anyway. The only thing you can do is make sure that you do tap into that. Like, I was having a conversation with a cab driver about the law of averages, which is quite cool. And like, again, I think it always boils down to the law of averages. You speak to so many people, you boil them down, and you qualify them to these group of people that you might be really good at, having this relationship with, to which you carry over 5 amazing relationships, whether they're business or, life or both. And you seem to be doing that really well. You go into the ebbs and flows of it. And I think that it's really worth people to be able to understand, if they identify with a certain person like you, how do you do it? Copy and paste, move on. And if it doesn't work for them, it doesn't work for them, but at least they learned something. And there is always something to be learned from your journey, because, first of all, it's an untold story. It should be written as a soliloquy, and that people should kind of like, because you've basically got the requiem of a PhD student going in, and nearly every single conversation I've had with a PhD has always been some level of crucible of fire, and 9 times out of 10, a little bit of marketing couldn't have hurt them. A little bit, just a little bit. So I don't know, like, and then I want to go back to the lens, I guess, and say, like, when you came out and you made the decision to do something about your use your PhD for something, what was that like? Because you must have either did you do I can't remember if you did a PDRA or you did a research position before you did, or you just jumped straight into it. Like, what was the game then? What was your thoughts?
Yeah, so I when I finished my PhD defense, I was actually working as it's technically a research assistant, right? Or postdoc. So I did a short postdoc for about 3 or 4 months, a lot of life change, and I catastrophically broke down, which I think was necessary for that change, if I'm honest, because I was in academia, and so I'd always wanted to run a company or do something along those lines, just had no idea in what. And I remember telling several people, and the first thing they said was, "Oh, Ricky, running a company is not a joke. These are like senior profs. It's difficult. We're trying to do this and we're trying to do that, and we're struggling, and this, that, and the other." And to be perfectly honest with you, I just went, like, "You're not me. You're struggling, but it doesn't mean I will. Like,
Yeah.
maybe you're just a bit shit at what you're doing." And I always say this. I told you I woke up in a foul mood today, but it's honest. I always say this, which is, I will lead how I was not led, and I will manage individuals how I was not managed. And academia and people in my personal life have taught me the greatest of lessons, which were the ones which initially I thought would hurt me the most. In actual fact, I spun it, reframed it, and I said, what the hell did I learn from that? Which is, okay, don't speak to individuals like this. Yes, push them, but then allow them to tell you when they are tired, and understand, because they are human. Not everybody's a Tesla bot, or whatever you want to call it, or the Terminator. Like, not all human beings operate on that mindset. There's a small fraction and percentage of the human population which can sustain 3 hours of sleep all their life. It doesn't mean that everybody will, and it doesn't mean just because one individual can.
Yeah, that's brilliant. No, because there is, so I had a similar sort of thing as well, and I don't know if you had the same thing through Martina, where, like, I'm pretty sure you did, because there's a point where you would just learn that this is not what you want. You learn what you don't want to do with it and how it translates over. And I'm going to make the marketing segue to say that, you look at your target addressable market, and your total addressable market, and your total serviceable market, and you go, I can't do any of those. And you just narrow them down, and I say, I don't want them. Because they're not good for me. They give me bad business. They give me bad everything, from mental health right down to, I can't even get them to work into this process and buy into it, because they're just ridiculous customers. And to that degree, I think this is where, like, this is the other side of it, where people don't talk about the what it takes to be in the space of being a marketer. And I think that we can make it as fancy as possible by putting in all these, like, cool acronyms to go along with it, like ROI, CPA, cost per acquisition, whatever it is you want to do it. But then when you break it down, it's like, well, we've still got to go down, execute what we need to do. We have to make some hard choices about what we do and don't run, because some things don't work, and we're not going to necessarily continue to do things with certain groups of people because they're not helpful to the brand. They're not helpful for moving the needle forward. And I think my next kind of question to you is that you had 3 different pivots, didn't you? At least, or is it just 3? I can't remember. But there were quite a few
the content,
pivots.
There's pivots in the content, and then one major one with the company.
Yeah. So I guess like this is something that I know that organizations don't like doing because it sets them back. It changes their position. It's a lot of resource and effect but from a solopreneur experience, it's easy for you to do that. But what were the decision making? What was the thoughts behind you making those decisions to change the way that you did your content and to change the way that you did your where you went as a business? Because there's lots to learn from there, and there is a mentality that should be copy and pasted that doesn't.
Yeah, there's a phrase that comes to mind, which is know thyself, and it all stems from that, because one's ego can make or break someone in 2 different ways. When you put ego with empathy, it can actually propel someone, but when you put ego with hunger, it can be quite dangerous. And I'm saying hunger in a sense of more power, more money, more status, more this. One thing that I went in this journey saying is, no matter how good the good moments are, I'll post about them. No matter how bad the bad moments are, I'll post about them. And I will stay true and honest to myself with my morals, ethics, philosophy in moving forwards. And when I saw the content wasn't really bringing in the right people, because you get mentioned, you're like, Ricky talks about this, this, and this on a post. And I'm like, shit, that's not what I'm trying to do. Need to pivot. That's clear. That's a clear response for how my content is being portrayed. No matter how much I think I'm writing for a certain audience, that's irrelevant, because it's the audience that will decide what it's about. So I could be thinking I'm talking about bio and deep tech, and they could say, oh, he's on about crypto. It'd be really weird if this happened, but oh, he's on about crypto, for example, because if the audio is portrayed, that's like such an abstract example.
And then your kids and then your friends from secondary school come up and say, oh yeah, I heard you about crypto, innit?
Actually, I'm in contact with one friend from secondary school. Yeah, we had a chat about that the other day, actually. Funny you mentioned it. She was like, I lost loads of money in something once. I was like, oh my God, tell me.
No.
She goes, oh, I'll tell you in person. I was like, okay, done. I'll see you tomorrow.
But Ricky, when you first came onto LinkedIn, okay, so we've talked about the pivoting, but how did you understand what to post? Had you floated around looking at everyone else's content first, which is quite normal, or was there like a process involved in how you started that?
Yeah, really good point, because I started posting June 2022, on the 1st of June. And for 3 to 4 months prior, as I was working on understanding me, my mental health, journaling, I was going on LinkedIn every day and reading people's content, reading influencers to see why they have gained a following, and looking at up and coming individuals to see how they're structuring their posts, what's a call to action, what the hell is a hook, is this information that is useful, and learning at the same time. And then even then I was wrong to begin with my posting. But the fact that I was posting allowed me to evaluate after 6 to 8 weeks. I think that's often a good chunk if you're posting. And I was posting daily as well, which is really tiring. But I'm an all or nothing kind of person. During my MSc and PhD, I went through phases of getting up at 4 or 5 in the morning, train. I wrote this in my newsletter, I think, on Sunday.
Yeah.
And it was like, I like knowing that I'm working while everybody's cozy in bed.
Yeah.
I felt tired reading that, by the way. Very tired.
I can be quite an intense person. And so I'm reading Elon Musk's book by Walter Isaacson, the biography of Elon Musk. And there's an element in there which really stuck to me, which was so Elon Musk is very intense, is described, and he's put out like that as by the recent viral video. And it says that he struggles with intimacy and therefore ends up transforming the lack of intimacy he's had in his life into intensity and projecting that. And I'm guaranteed that my traumas, my childhood, everything like that was the lack of intimacy, connection with family, friends, anybody, and I transformed that into intensity, which actually propelled me to where I am now and continues to. So I think of the old Stephen Bartlett question, which is, are you driven or dragged? And I'm like, I was dragged most of my life, and now I'm dragged, but very driven. So it's going a lot quicker.
You can be both. You can
Yeah.
always
Yeah,
be
that's
both.
what I was thinking. It must be a different ratio at different times, surely.
Mm.
Like sometimes more drag, sometimes more drive, no?
Yeah, it fluctuates, right? It's never going to be driven by 100% and dragged by 100%, like 60-40, 0-100, whatever it may be, right? The numbers do fluctuate. But yeah, I spent a lot of time really studying and understanding, like, what the hell are these people writing? Why are they talking about these things? And then really tried to post. I remember making a post about, here are my, if you ever are struggling with posting on LinkedIn or afraid, here are my first 5 or 8 posts. And they was just dead. And then I made one about PhDs and what a PhD is. I was like, PhD is a doctor of philosophy. You're a doctor of thinking, learning, understanding, and then went into it. And it went like what I call nerd viral because it had 20,000 impressions with like 300
No,
likes.
don't mention the I word.
No.
Oh, yeah. We love impressions.
Wagging away there. No,
But yeah.
but the thing is that you know, as much as we're waving the impressions flag around, it's it's the social validator for whether your work is doing well or not. Let's ignore the algorithm for a minute and see how it impacts, because you know when you're doing this for the first time and you don't have people like you and me and Martina around giving you that sane advice to say don't worry about the impressions, it's as long as you're targeting the right audience. That's a really good validator for somebody who's coming in doing the post for the first time and realizing this is what's working and this is what doesn't work and this is what resonates, because again, the audience is what makes you in terms of where your position is. And it must have been like very weird for you to be like, oh great, so this is the content that my people respond to. And then how did you respond to that? Because you have this really good choice of being able to say, I guess I can go with it, or go, I don't want that, and you have to fight and change it. And like
Yeah.
you must have had those like that warring experience between, I don't like this, I don't like how people perceive me, and okay, I'll do it.
Yeah, so if I continue to post about transitioning as an academic, alt-ac, PhD environment, things like that, I just gained thousands of followers. And it's evident in the individuals who have started posting about this and gained tens of thousands of followers in a few months. And Martina put it in a really good way. We're like bound by our trauma of the PhD. And it's so true. Like you say, you'll find the like-minded individuals. Like I said,
Yep.
people like us always find each other. The traumatized PhD candidates and graduates will find each other off LinkedIn. And it was initially really validating for me. Like, oh my God, got so many impressions, got so many likes. Look at me, I'm a bit of a somebody. And then I went, but actually, am I building what I'm intending on building? And the answer was no. So I still continue to post about PhD lessons in hindsight. And then it got to a point where I was like, yeah, this is starting to go in the wrong direction because I'm starting to be noticed for this, and it's not where I want to go. And by that point, I kind of had a couple of mentions about entrepreneurship and things like this. So the content shifted from like PhD more into trying to run a business and reach out and learn about what is sales, what is marketing, how to get people on calls.
Solopreneurship.
Yeah, it was more like the solopreneurship. But, yeah.
It makes my skin crawl, because it's like, you know, like when you got those isms that try to make people a thing. Like, I don't know, to quote a very famous film called Mean Girls, Gretchen, stop trying to make fetch happen. It's this vibe. It's like the solopreneurship feels like it's trying to be fetch and it's trying to happen, and it's not. It just, I don't know. This is just me and my opinion about it. But obviously, there's trends that come across. I think the real core of it though is that you're defining a path that people identify with, and they just don't know what to call it yet, but it is your path and they want to copy and paste it. And it's good that you're recognizing it. I guess, like, if I flip this on the lens of like, if you're a startup biotech, or if you're you know, a big org, and there are more conversations so this conversation is just happening between you as to saying that you don't want to be known for this. Now, there'll be companies that are there that probably you've got more than 10 people in the organization to more than 10,000. And they're going to be like, I don't know if I want to be known for this, but maybe I do, but maybe I don't. And like, I mean, what would you say to those kind of individuals who are still warring about their position and where they sit? Because you've got a very unique perspective of being able to move in such an in an agile way. And what is that sort of like, how did you close yourself on saying, I need to not go this because I didn't feel it? Because some people wouldn't, they just stay, like, most PhDs were like, I'm going to steer the course. I'm going to continue going through and I'm going to commit to this madness. Even if I'm not happy with it, I made my bed, I'm laying in it. Like, but what was that for you? What was the thing that you said to yourself, no, I don't want to be identified like this?
And not being a stubborn little shit like most PhDs are, to be honest. Because we are, like, we get through the PhD by being resilient, stubborn, and to the point, which is why you speak to somebody who's just defending their thesis and you ask them a few questions and they are very blunt because they're still in the mindset of need to defend this thesis. Like, I'm getting questioned, you get bombarded. So not being stubborn in that aspect, and also strategy, but long-term strategy. Everybody wants the quick ROI. Like, they want to see, I don't know, like calls being booked yesterday. They want to see money in the bank the day before, and it just escalates so much. So one thing which really helped me was like kind of beta test stuff. Put it out there, put out a few feelers, certain days, but be consistent with it. It's the same when I used to train. I was like go through like fluctuations of like gaining muscle mass, dropping body fat, and constantly doing that for years, where I tracked my calories on MyFitnessPal for over 1,000 days.
Oh dear.
And I was one of those people giving others anxiety, literally. And so it was a long-term strategy. It had to be a long-term strategy, and something didn't work, I'd chop and change and bring that in. So I don't know, if companies have 10 people on board, get one of the people to start posting on LinkedIn about something a little bit different. Obviously, don't do something flip side of a different coin, where if you're a bio and deep tech company, don't go randomly talking about investments in crypto. I'm just going to use that because we said it before.
Yeah.
That would be weird. I think that's confusing.
Yeah.
But you can put out the odd bit of information, and then ask your audience, the ones that interact. I always used to try and get on calls with them. Like, oh, you interacted with my post. What was insightful about it? Or what made you follow me? Because these are the individuals that have, well, they're the ones that interacted clearly for a reason. Now, if I ask the reason, two things can happen. They can provide said reason, or they can tell me to get lost. I'm going to avoid swearing. So it's like it's a win-win either way, because if they tell me to get lost, then all right, probably didn't really want to do business with them and I've protected. But if they give me the reason, then the pin moves forwards for not only my content and business and strategy and execution and everything.
It's a level of confirmation bias that I guess this is a lot of people are guilty of it. We search for a specific type of bias that validates what we're currently doing. So it just says, yeah, and it gives us permission to continue to doing such certain behaviors, which is interesting because I think when you're looking at the psychology of marketing and psychology of business itself, there are so many straightforward things, and then we add layers of complexity to it. But really, it comes down to our behaviors, like, our behaviors and how we react to certain things in the market. And our perceptions as well. Like we're so, if I go back to the whole PhD scenario and how you're conditioned to have to defend your thesis in a viva, like you carry that trauma with you the whole way through, and then you remain continuously defensive even though you have no reason to. But also people, because it's 10 years of your work compounded into a thesis, and then you have to sit there and you have to challenge the rigor, or you get challenged by the rigor, only you to find out that actually now you're stuck with it. It's almost like being branded, and you've been branded forever, walking through the rest of the world thinking that you constantly have to defend something, when actually you don't need to. You can accept your position and say, okay, cool, this is not for you, and then that's it. And I think this is segueing into a really good question for perhaps the both of you. Like, and this is a bit of a loaded one. Do you think that our current way of educating PhDs does not set us up successfully to communicate and market with the rest of the world, regardless of whether they continue to do a postdoctoral activity or whether they go into industry?
After you, Martina.
Oh, okay. Well, I think we're trained really well to talk to other people in our sphere, trained very well to communicate in that sphere. But outside of that, not so much. Now, some people, like Ricky, will have naturally just learnt how to do that. But that's not the case for everyone. And actually, a lot of people struggle with when they come outside, like learning how to communicate. And I don't think there's enough training. I mean, this is one of the things that actually really bugs me, that, you know, when you do your PhD, Ricky, I had to do some graduate school modules in my first year. I don't know if you had to do that. But one of the things that would have been really helpful was to have like a marketing or business module available to us. But I guess the issue is, would we have taken it?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, I think the current training is not advertised as training, because that's what it is. It's actually advertised as cheap and or free labor. And hey, you get a PhD after this. Well done. So it's worth it. You have to keep doing it. And differing institutes will differ depending on how brutal they are. It's the mentality of I suffered and I got here, so you can suffer and that's how you get here. It's a very one-sided sort of mentality. And I describe it as the old boardroom corporate mentality, which is leave your feelings at the door. We're getting on with shit right now. And you just go for it and you go for broke. Like, the amount of times I've had people say to me in academia that, oh, I used to work X amount of hours and do this. And it was like literally a competition. Who can stay in the lab the longest? Who has the more Western blot plates of cells in the incubator? Who ran the most gels in the day? And I was like a rich lab which had precast gels and quick transfer. And so
Get out. Get off this
so,
podcast.
Never made a gel in my life from scratch. So
don't know the struggles.
That just is the case of, oh, you can run more then. So I used to do a one-day Western, which was from lysing cells all the way through to developing after secondary, just for like antibody checking. And so you really get in that point, and it's a good point, Martina, that so I didn't take any graduate classes that would have helped, but if there was business, marketing, sales, like academia just portrays them as, oh, they're a bit shit, you're not going to need that. I remember speaking to a prof after I wanted to leave, and I said, oh, this is really cool position I've applied for, and I'm the second or third stage of the interview. And he goes, oh, so it's just sales then? Yeah. And I'm like, as I come to realize, sales is involved in everything.
Right.
Absolutely everything. To the point of, it's just crazy. And so the mentality needs to change.
Yeah, it does.
Whether or not the new PIs are coming on board, and I'm seeing a little bit of it, but it's still the old school mentality, which is more is more and more is better. When that's not the case.
What needs to change?
You don't need time to think, do you? No. In academia, you're not allowed time to think.
No, you're not. If I say I'm stopping experiments to think about my results and how to next strategize, they were like, oh, but you can plate some cells, and while they grow, you can think. Yeah. And you're like, yeah, but that is now taking up that thinking space, because I know I have to lyse my cells and people are using my buffers and blah, blah, blah. And it just escalates. So that whole notion of I need to think about which is what scientists should be doing, is sitting there thinking, what does my data mean? Am I being biased? Getting somebody else, having a meeting with several people and saying, okay, let's discuss this and next steps, strategizing. And I took everything of how shitty things were and I've applied it in the business sense, which is why I'm very strategic in what I do. I love to obtain data, and I love to analyze the data correctly and then speak with others that I trust in the field.
Even if the data's messy? Even if the data is...
Especially if the data's messy.
Actually, so I've got two questions.
Best kind of data.
I've got two questions. Well, first of all, I'm going to segue into two questions. But one, I love to talk about messy data, because messy data says something about the environment that you're in and the system that you are. So I guess, what do you learn the most from messy data? Because ultimately it informs you about your strategy, the approach, and where you go. And then the other question is, so now you've got that messy data in mind, and then we go back and we tie it into the rest of the questions. What do you think needs to change for us to get better as an industry? And do you think it's going to happen within the next 5 years? That's actually 3 questions. But let's start off with the messy data one.
Yeah, messy data wise, if I ever had messy data, which was a fair few times, if I'm honest.
No.
Who has
I
clean
don't believe
data?
it.
Who has
I
clean
think
data? I
I did.
call you out.
I did send a picture once to Martina, and it had my when I was writing my thesis, and it was a Western blot that I was putting the figures together. She was like, she ignored what the picture was,
Ridiculous.
and she goes, "That is not your Western blot. I've just zoomed in. That's crazy." I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh yeah, thanks."
The most
Didn't even
perfect
realize.
Western blot I've ever seen in my life.
Oh gosh, but messy data wise, if the points I've had messy data, I've definitely missed something. I've failed at something in the protocol, whether it be early on stages, and now we're talking about the real science of it, right? But also the most obvious in the analysis. Or am I just viewing the data wrong? Like I may be the wrong lens. So I'll show it to someone else, they view it with a different lens, several other people, and then I need to make a decision. Otherwise, you get into analysis paralysis, decision paralysis, which is useless.
Yeah.
Like how many times have we seen people doing experiments, analyzing, and then doing more experiments? It's like, okay, what's your concluding remarks?
Yeah.
What's the what moves the pin forwards next? And you see this in business all the time. Decision paralysis. That I don't know what to do. I'm like, well, why don't we start at the most basic level of, do you like this or not? Oh no, not really. I'm like, well, problem solved. Like, why are you even proceeding with this investment? Like, why didn't you like it? Oh well, the founder said this, and this, and or the science of it hasn't been really validated, and they didn't hold the IP, or the university did it. Holds the IP. I'm like, well, there you go. You've kind of got your answer. Why are you stressing?
Yeah.
They're like, oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
This
So, yeah,
always makes me think of product market fit.
Yeah.
Everything
Yeah.
you say, because there are so many companies that believe they've got product market fit because, like you said, Jano, it's the old confirmation bias.
Yeah.
So they just keep pushing and keep pushing, and they won't pivot because they feel that is giving up on their product.
Yeah.
And everything you've described here is almost like that you learn this is not going to fit my market. I need to change.
Yeah.
Not you as a person, the business. You're good.
And then now we're talking about change. It kind of nicely segues onto the other questions I did ask. So now that we're talking about the way that PhDs are taught how to utilize their skills rather in industry, what do you think needs to change from an institution basis?
People be kinder, man. Start there. So there's 3 things I look for. I know it's such a vague thing to say. I do know this.
I was going to
and
say, I was
cliche.
like, I had to resist eye rolling for a moment there, but no, you're right. And let's hear it out.
And
Yeah.
I'm going to explain, because it will sound like, oh God, like, well, of course he says something like that, like the classic cliche. But there's 3 things I look for on a call with people. Are they kind? Are they understanding? And then are they knowledgeable?
Oh,
And if they're kind, they're most likely going to be understanding. I've not met a kind person who's not understanding. And then the final tier is, do they actually know their shit and what they do? Are they good at what they do? And it's always the final tier, because if I'm working someone with someone who's a pain in the ass, or someone's mentoring me, i.e. PhD supervisor, and they're a pain in the ass, it's not really going to go down well. It's damaging, and it's long-term effects.
Yeah.
So there's a difference between pushing someone to get the most out of them and being just traumatizing, like traumatizing someone. And I think a key aspect of that is people need to realize that they're human, that other people are human, that they're speaking to a human being rather than an AI algorithm or a machine that can be switched on and off. And that actually different people's boundary for breaking and progressing lie at different points. So my pressure scale to move for growth may be someone else's complete breaking point,
Yeah.
and vice versa. And when we understand that, the pin moves forwards massively, because nobody wants to work with someone who's a bit shit or a prick. Excuse my language. And it's true.
The second one more so, I would say.
Yeah, and or
Is the first also lead to the second, or the second lead to the first? I don't know. Either way, yeah.
they're in equilibrium together.
The dichotomy exists.
Exactly, it is to a degree that level of dichotomy between the two. But if you work with someone who gives you leeway, and then if you try and pull too much of the string, they call you out on it. You're like, wait a minute, they've got a point. They want my growth. They want me to do better, but also I still need to get the job done.
So
And this is the key thing. And then that transitions really well from academia into industry. This is why the PhDs have such a difficult time transitioning out of academia, because they're just not given the skill set.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, you do your PhD, you stay in academia.
Yeah.
Like, no, there are so many individuals who flourish outside of academia and are made for that.
Yeah.
In particular in entrepreneurship. All the skills gained in a PhD quite literally identify in entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Like all of them.
Agreed.
Got one question left, Martina, before we close things off.
I've got one, and it's a big one, and I'm going to flip it completely. Because I would just be interested to hear from you what you think marketing is.
It's probably a tough question. It's really made me feel panicked.
You're good at this. You could make things complicated simple, right? Right?
That actually used to be my LinkedIn banner to begin with.
Oh,
Oh yeah.
oh yeah.
I do.
I have a screenshot of that.
Oh, you do? Oh gosh.
Don't try and avoid this question.
So
Go.
I think marketing. So I think marketing is just being able to convey your message in an understandable way. What you're trying to say, who you're trying to say it for, and what for.
Boom.
That's it. Literally, any more added to that is just an overcomplication of things. Like, keep it short, sweet, simple. Marketing should be your elevator pitch and then expand.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Great description.
Yeah. You heard it. You heard it from Ricky today. You did. I'm going to close off the podcast with one final question. And this is a complete divergence, but if you had a theme tune that played whilst you walk into every single pitch room, pitch deck, pitch room, like, you know, when you're talking to VCs, whatever, if you were just walking into any situation, what would that theme tune be?
I've actually got a few, and I've thought about.
You've only got one. You got one. You've only got one.
I've only got one.
Just one.
Yeah. So, "Never Give Up" by Sia.
Oh, good one.
Great power ballad. Dude, respect. I like it. I'd wear that hat with high heels and walk in if it was me. But that's just me. I don't know. There's something about that song that says I need to wear high heels and just power in. I don't care who I am. So
That's
I
a
like
great
it.
question.
Yeah.
It's a good question. Yeah, I can describe the outfit as well. Walking in if you want.
Yeah, go on. You got 2 minutes.
So I'd have like my sunglasses on, a baseball cap, dressed casually in trainers, but also a lit cigar in one hand, and then carrying like with my backpack, because I always wear a backpack, and then like a nice bottle of champagne. Yeah.
God, which champagne? Yeah. Which champagne? That's a very important question.
So I'm a big fan of Runat Blanc de Blanc. I like a Blanc de Blanc champagne. Or the Dutz Blanc de Blanc 2010 vintage is a good one.
2010? What do you want to do? Obliterate your taste buds?
It's actually, no, it's really good. It was that's the one that I popped for when I defended my thesis. I bought a magnum of it.
So this is flavored with trauma. I like it.
That's what the bubbles are.
All right, I was about to say.
Like a secret list there for anybody listening, and they're like, "Oh, I need to get him a present in the future." I'm like, "There you go."
Right.
Oh yeah, we're all going to go out and buy that.
Yeah, they're right. In our next whatever shindig we're doing. Oh God, Ricky, it's been fantastic having you on the podcast.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Loved it.
Yeah, great. Where can people find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn.
Great.
That is the main source. What I use. So yeah, LinkedIn.com/in/Ricky PhD, I think is how it's done.
Nice.
I post pretty much daily. Write a Sunday reflection newsletter reflecting on the week, 37 weeks strong. Right. Going to be converting that into a podcast, calling it The Reflection. So that'll be about philosophy, neuroscience, AI, deep and biotech and investments, bringing on investors, VCs, family offices all around the world. And yes, always open for a chat with people and to get to know them, like building strong business relationships rather than the milk and bread transaction.
Like what we're doing on this podcast. We've actually, I think we're going to be in February, not all of us, but I think most of us. No, June is probably where. June, we're going to be 1 year together, friends forever. So
nice.
Yeah.
Hopefully I get an invite to the next meetup.
Yeah, we have to find that one. Sounds Ricky.
I know, I was waiting for that.
Yeah, so yeah, we'll close off this podcast. Thank you for joining us, Ricky. My name is Jane,
I'm Martina.
and you've been listening to Market Your Science. Tune in for another episode, and until then, have a fantastic day wherever you are, whenever you are. Toodles.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed the podcast. And if you liked our content, then please hit subscribe and like our Spotify and LinkedIn pages. If you want more helpful life sciences marketing tips, then follow me and Martina on LinkedIn. Don't hesitate to DM us with your questions.